wait a minute, he was running from where? I said, down the path. He ran up the path here after a porcupine. And I said, well, this doesn't make sense because his boot laces are untied. He said, yeah, that's where he tripped over. I said, no, take another look. I said, the boot itself is tight to the leg. I said, if he had been running, that boot would have been wide open.
And Zanin was concerned about another part of the story.
Well, he said he rolled him over. He tried to perform CPR. I said, CPR? I says, the hole's right through his heart. I said, it's dead center in the chest. I says, he's a doctor. He didn't know CPR. He's dead.
Martin Dillon's body was taken to the county morgue in the basement of a funeral home in Montrose. On the death certificate, the coroner, who was a political appointee, ruled the manner of death an accident. The funeral took place in the same church where Martin Dillon was married. Dr. Scher was one of his pallbearers. For Martin Dillon's father, Larry, sadness was overshadowed by suspicion and doubt. He did not believe his only son's death was an accident. A few months after the shooting death of Martin Dillon, Dr. Stephen Scher divorced his wife, Anne. Some said it was the stress of the death of his best friend. Others said trouble had been brewing between Scher and his wife for some time. Either way, Stephen Scher moved from the small town of Montrose, Pennsylvania, and eventually settled in North Carolina. A year and a half later, Stephen Scher remarried. His new wife, Pat Dillon, the widow of his best friend, Martin Dillon. When Larry Dillon learned that his daughter-in-law and his 2 grandchildren were moving in with the only witness to his son's death, he grew increasingly suspicious. He questioned the conclusions of his son's autopsy, which was done by a family doctor who was not trained in forensic medicine. So Larry Dillon went to visit this man, Stu Bennett, a friend of his son's and a former police officer who was running a small company in Montrose specializing in accident reconstruction.
He felt that he was murdered. He did not tell me specifically why, or he couldn't. He just felt in his heart that it was not the way it was reported, was correct.
Bennett studied the autopsy photos and read the report. The first thing he noticed was that Dillon's wound was 1 inch by 1.5